Hi, Abby. I was just having a think today about did I become interested in hypnotherapy and hypnosis? Why I became interested in hypnosis, or many years ago, long before you were born, that's for sure. Anyway, but I remember seeing a film, and it was I think it was the Manchurian Candidate, but I remember seeing the original version. That is, I saw this film on television on one wet Saturday afternoon in the days of black and white TV, and what the Chinese were, I think it was, they were trying to perfect the best assassin, and it was all through sort of what we would call hypnosis. It was or what you think is a hypnosis anyway, mind control and all that thing. And oh, I would like to do that. And on the back of comics in those days, they had little pictures, sort of adverts, and they used to have these sort of spirals that went round like that, and swinging watches, and how to get your girlfriend to love you sort of idea, and so I got more interested. Yes, yes. And I got more interested in that as I was growing up. By the way, I was about 9 or 10 when all this was happening. But I could never really work out how you could do that. Anyway, when I was about late teens, I decided I'd go and see a hypnotherapist. I had no idea what to expect, but I knew he would ask me what was wrong, how they could help. And I hadn't got a clue because I didn't think there was anything wrong. So I made something up. And I went and knocked on the door. Again, it was a sort of a rainy day. And I knocked on the door, and half expecting, because I'd seen all these films about what hypnosis and some sort of butler from a Dracula film coming to the door, saying hello and all that sort of thing. Anyway, this really nice chap came, looked perfectly normal, and went into a room and sat down. We just had a chat, and he just explained a bit about what hypnosis was. And one thing, I was slightly disappointed in the fact that he did say he couldn't make me do anything I didn't want to do. And because I was hoping he could make me do all sorts of things. But anyway,
I suppose that's the kind of connotation, or that's what most people think of when they think of hypnosis, isn't it? And, you know, when you see it in films and even cartoons and stuff, you know, the Jungle Book with the snake that's got the swirly eyes, and Aladdin, I think, is another one. It's all about swirly eyes, and it's always the bad guy, isn't it? There's sort of this evil mind control belief about it, and a lot of stage hypnosis promotes that as well. But I think we misunderstand the difference between hypnosis and hypnotherapy, and actually the therapy part of it is all about using the hypnosis for a therapeutic purpose, isn't it? And I think lots of people are surprised as to how different it is to their expectations when they go. So that sounds like it happened to you on the very first time.
Yeah, and it did. And of course, as you mentioned that, I mean, hypnosis is the tool, and that's been around since the ancient Egyptians and Greeks and Mayans and Chinese and so on, and been developed over the years. And by the way, I know you were going to ask, how do you know it's been around since the ancient Egyptians? Well,
you're not that old.
Well, you know, there's hieroglyphics of what we would call hypnosis now being used to help. It's actually hypnotherapy, because it's used to help people get better from whatever an ailment was.
And I get it showed up over the centuries, hasn't it, under different things. So I think one of the most common things that people have heard of before hypnosis came around was perhaps mesmerism.
Yes, yeah.
And that's one that a lot of people have heard of. But actually, it's kind of the same thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
But how did your session end up going? How was your session?
Well, it was very good. From what I remember, I can remember I did some visualization about in a field, and climbing over a fence and going in a field, and it was great because I also got complimented at the end because the chap said I was one of the most imaginative people he'd ever met. So I was really chuffed up. Oh, to heck with the hypnosis. I've just got that, you see, and that was a good thing. But
well,
yeah.
actually, that's what it's all about, though, isn't it? It's all about somebody guiding your imagination to help you change your brain in some way, because the reality is your brain doesn't know the difference between imagination and reality. So you can use your imagination to almost rewire your habits or rewire thinking in your subconscious, can't you?
Yeah. And the other thing that I didn't realize that I have, the inklings were put into me then, but also the over learning how to be a hypnotherapist, etc., over years, and then training people, is the fact that you don't do anything to anybody. You use the exact words there: guide, help.
Yeah.
And we all need a bit of helping hand as we go through life. And that, I think, is where a lot of the older, you mentioned Mesmerism. That one. And other hypnotherapists or hypnotists, and where things sort of failed, even people like Freud and these characters, they sort of believed that they were doing things to people, and people believed that things were being done to them.
Yeah.
Well, it's not that at all. It's, in fact, the other way around. It's the individual, the client, patient, whatever you want to call them, is the they're the person that's doing it to them, whatever it is.
The reality is that nobody can be hypnotized against their will. It has to be something that you want to do. And I suppose in our job, we at least know that when somebody comes to see us, they're there for that reason. But actually, if you wanted to resist, you absolutely can resist. And I think, I don't know about you, but the success rates of hypnosis are around 93%, according to a lot of studies. And of that percentage that isn't successful, it's normally because they're there under duress, somebody's made them go, or they've kind of had their arm twisted and they actually don't really want to do it themselves, because they have to be part of it. It's not us, like you say, it's not us doing something to them, it's us guiding them to make a change in themselves, but they have to be a part of that and want to do it and be active in it as well, don't they?
Yeah, that's right. And it is exactly that. And that's my experience as well, that where things don't work out for somebody, it is 99.9% the fact that they didn't really want to be there in the first place. They've been bullied into it. And a lot of people think about going to hypnotherapists for things like stopping smoking and that type of thing. Well, that is one of the prime areas where you find out whether people want to stop or not. Or is it something they think they should do, or their partner doesn't like it, or something like that. And if they don't go for the right reasons, it's not going to happen. But then again, if you don't want to do anything in any form of life, you're not going to do it. You know, so there's nothing magic about hypnosis or anything.
I guess the sort of stage shows and things, you know, when people think about hypnosis, they think Darren Brown or Paul McKenna or somebody along those lines, where it very much looks different than it does in therapy, because that is all about showmanship, isn't it? And I think if you actually go and watch any of these shows, they pick out very specific people that are very suggestible and that really want to get involved. So they're much more likely to go into hypnosis. But it's not about them having to do it or being made to do it. It's just that they're more suggestible and almost want to be up there. So they're more likely to get involved. Because if they got somebody up there at random that didn't want that, they could just as easily resist it as well.
Yeah. And even if the as you say, that the people that sort of volunteer to go on the stage, that's because, well, they know they might be asked to do something daft because it's entertainment. But even then, even if they have been barking or doing silly things on stage, if they were asked to do something they didn't want to do, they wouldn't do it, because another misconception of hypnosis and hypnotherapy is the fact that people can be made to do things, and that is not the case. And like you mentioned, to do with films earlier on, or the stage shows, if you look at a stage show, and some of them are excellent, they're really good fun, great entertainment, and so on, and they have about 5 or 6 people sitting, maybe in some sort of hypnotic state. They don't use all those people. They only some of them, or some of them all the time, because they're willing to do whatever it is they want to do. By the way, I'm not knocking stage hypnosis, it's just different.
Oh, I love stage hypnosis. I absolutely love going to things like that. It's fascinating, I suppose, especially because it's so different to what we do as therapists. But the tools are still the same, aren't they? It's still hypnosis. And I think that's where people get confused, because hypnosis is a state of mind, isn't it? That's that relaxed, sort of trance, zoned out state. But hypnotherapy is about using that state for a therapeutic purpose, not for entertainment. So I think people get quite confused about the difference between that sort of theatrical stage performance type of hypnosis and then how it's used for therapy. And they kind of expect the two to be the same, and they're really very different. And I know, you know, when clients come into my office, they're quite surprised to find that it's just quite calm and relaxing, and they're all ready to sort of lie down and have a watch swung in front of them or something to make them go to sleep. And sleep's a word that I hear quite a lot as well. People expect to be put to sleep, so to speak, and that's not what it is either, is it? And I don't know how you explain the feeling to your clients, but I always explain it like that moment when you've eaten a massive Sunday dinner, or like a Christmas dinner, and you sat on the sofa and you're that full you need to just close your eyes and relax, and you can still hear everything going on around you. You're still awake, you can still hear what's going on, but you just can't be bothered to move. Everything just feels so heavy and relaxed that you can't be bothered. So I don't know about you, but I'm always like that on Christmas Day. When I get to the end of the day, I'm absolutely stuffed and I'm just on the sofa.
That's good. Well, I'm coming around to your house anyway on Christmas Day. It can be sort of explained also a wee bit like, if you know how you get engaged with a TV program or reading a book. You're into it. You can feel the emotion of it. Maybe you can, whether you're reading or the book or it's an audio book or something. But you know what's going on around you. You've got a general awareness of what's happening, because you, as you say, you're not asleep and you're not in. I actually don't like using the word trance, though it is used often in our circles. But
yeah,
it, because that to me conjures up visions from these old films of sort of a zombie-like state.
Yeah,
and it's not. You know,
I think I'm the same as you, that I tend to use the word relaxation, deep relaxation, because that's what it is, isn't it? Or focused attention on something, because a bit like you were saying about the telly, you actually put yourself in a state of hypnosis on a regular basis. And the telly's a good one when you're so focused on something that somebody's talking to you and you just go, oh, sorry, did you say something? And you haven't noticed because your attention is focused somewhere else. And that's what hypnosis is like, isn't it? And driving as well, when you're driving along and you just suddenly arrive at your destination and think, oh, I don't actually remember getting here. that's gone quick. And it's because your conscious mind has been focused on something else, and your subconscious has just been busy doing what it needs to do. It's kind of separating those two parts of your thinking, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. I mentioned the driving there. Oddly enough, there's been research into that state when people do drive, and the research finds that they don't crash, they don't go the wrong way, they don't run anybody over. And in fact, if somebody was to jump out in front of you when you're driving in this sort of altered state of awareness or hypnosis, that your reaction times are actually quicker than they are when you drive in a conscious way. I don't want anybody to go and try that, by the way, go looking for anybody to jump out and see how, and see that. But because what hypnosis does, it heightens your senses, your sense of touch, taste, smell, sight. And just on the point of research, I don't think many people realize that there's tons and tons of research papers and literature, all pointing towards how effective hypnosis is in all sorts of different circumstances. I had a quick look on Google Scholar the other day to see how many papers and bits of literature there are. And there's, I think it was 270,000 bits of research type documents and books and so on. And I don't mean that's the newspaper sort of salacious stories about whatever. These are actual academic studies.
Well, it's interesting because a bit like we were talking about the hypnotherapy and the sort of show business type hypnosis, there's a difference between scientific hypnosis and art hypnosis as well, isn't it? You could look at it in the two different ways. And scientifically, there's a lot of evidence that hypnosis is very effective. And certainly in the UK at the moment, they're trying to use more hypnosis type things in A&E departments as pain relief rather than just giving people medication for everything all the time, because it is as effective. So yeah, that's quite an interesting thing that I'd read in a medical journal quite recently about trying to use these hypnotic techniques in A&E as pain relief instead, which I think is brilliant. And actually, that was kind of the way that hypnosis was going, wasn't it? Historically, that was going to be a main form of pain relief within the NHS. You tell this story much better than me, though.
I hope you're sitting comfortably, because once upon a time, it just so happens that I'm just for anybody listening or watching, I'm based in Scotland at the moment, and in the middle of the 19th century, there were two Scots people who were involved. Well, there were more, but there were two quite famous people that were involved in hypnosis, and one James Braid, he coined the term hypnosis, which he hurriedly tried to change because it actually doesn't indicate what happens at all, but it comes from the Greek meaning to sleep. And we've just talked about the fact it isn't about sleep. But there was another Scotsman, a chap called Esdale, who also was called James. And he was a surgeon in the army in India, the British Army in India. And he performed in about the 1840s, I think it was. He performed lots of operations, including amputations and so on. And they were all done under hypnosis. Well, they were hypnosis anesthetic, if you want to call it that. Because in those days, if you had to have an operation in hospital, that was just as much likely to kill you off as why you went in the first place.
Well, it would be because of infection and things like that. They didn't have antibiotics, and the survival rate on ships was not great, was it?
No.
And he stood out, didn't he? I think because his survival rates were so much better. Yeah,
and it was amazing the number of people that he performed work with. But apparently, there's a couple of stories about this, but I like this particular version of the story. He was on his way back to Britain to give a lecture at the Royal Society in London about the benefits of hypnosis during operations. And on the way back, which took weeks, a long time, Queen Victoria was about to give birth to one of her children, and I won't go into the story of this, but incidentally, that was from another Scotsman, but that's another matter. She used anaesthetic, what we regard as anaesthetic now, and to help with the birth. And because she'd used it, then it became sort of anaesthetic became popular, etc. And Baird, when he arrived, his balloon had been deflated, and so hypnosis sort of went into abeyance for about 100 years in terms of its medical use. But today, it's used quite often by dentists.
Yeah.
It's used in the NHS during hypnobirthing. It's often used in that. And as you mentioned earlier, and so
I myself use it for medical purposes, or I work with people that are going through fertility treatments or struggling. They've had medical diagnosis of polycystic ovaries or low sperm counts and things, and hypnosis does make improvements to those things. So it helps massively with fertility as well. There's lots of different medical things that hypnosis is used for, which is fascinating, and it seems to be becoming more and more popular within the medical world. I think it's sort of been a bit poo-pooed, hasn't it, over the last century, and now there's more and more science behind it, and there's more and more research going into it. It's becoming a lot more commonplace, used within the NHS, which is brilliant. I don't know what that's like across the rest of the world, but certainly in the UK, it's definitely becoming a bit more common practice in the medical profession.
I'm just going to ask a sort of devil's advocate type question. And that is, yes. And as we've talked about hypnosis and so on, and for various things, and you mentioned specifically about fertility there, and I'm sure there might be some people that would say, well, how can hypnosis increase the sperm count? So how can hypnosis, just in general terms, help in something that's a sort of physical issue?
There's a few different things, really, because we already know that things like smoking, drinking, being overweight, unhealthy eating, all those things definitely have an impact on fertility and egg quality and sperm quality. So hypnosis can help practically to help with those sorts of things. It's very effective at helping people stop smoking. It's got about a 95% success rate with smoking. Same with weight loss, drinking alcohol, reducing caffeine. So anything that's kind of a bit of a habit is brilliant at changing your mindset and rewiring your thinking about those sorts of things. But also stress has proved to be a massive factor on fertility, because without going into all the ins and outs of it, the stress response, when you feel stressed, it's pumping hormones into your body, and it actually draws blood away from parts of your body that it's not required at that time. So historically, stress was a bit of a life or death thing. It was in a situation in that moment where you were either going to have to fight for your life or run like hell. And therefore, at that time, it needs to draw blood and energy away from other parts of your body to give you the energy to do that. And in that kind of moment, making babies is not really a priority. So that's one of the first places it draws energy and blood away from. And in this day and age, we don't really need our stress response in the same way, but our brains don't know that. So we create stress responses over things that we don't need to be stressed about. And we're actually living in a high level of stress a lot of the time. So by reducing stress and feeling calmer and reducing those chemicals that come along with stress, it actually increases blood flow to your reproductive area, and therefore improves sperm quality and egg quality as well.
Yeah, and thank you for that. I'm sorry to just sort of spring that on you in that way, but that's exactly right, because I do get a lot of people that, when I talk about this, say, well, how can it help with physical things? And the stress area, the anxiety, is is something that hypnosis really can help with. And it means that you're controlling that. The individual is controlling that stress, anxiety.
And you can learn to manage it yourself as well.
Yeah.
Stress is something that is controllable. And I think that's something that we don't believe in the way that we think about mental health, but actually we create our own stress and we can therefore learn to control it. But you can only do that when you know how. And hypnosis is a brilliant sort of quick way of managing stress.
Mm-hmm.
And actually trying for a baby is one of the most stressful things you can ever possibly do as well. So it's a really, particularly in fertility, it's a really vicious cycle, because you're trying to get pregnant, you're not getting pregnant. That creates more stress. You're creating stress about stress, and it just spirals and feels really very out of control.
Yeah.
But I think that can be applied to a lot of other things as well. Stress is a big factor in a lot of people's lives. That's why a lot of people say that they smoke to relieve stress. So even just if you want to stop smoking just on its own or lose weight, people eat because they're stressed. So the stress aspect comes into a lot of reasons why people come to see us in the first place.
That's a really interesting thing about people smoking, because it relieves their stress. But as you know, that I think the average sort of cigarette has somewhere around about 6,000 chemicals in it, most of which induce stress of some description. So it's really not the smoking that reduces the stress, it's the breathing that goes with it that reduces the anxiety and the stress. But perhaps in future podcasts we can look at some specific areas in general terms. That the fertility one is really interesting, and the sort of, should we say, more run-of-the-mill things like the smoking, but just in general well-being, boosting confidence, etc. Just I think before we go in this sort of general thing, there's a few myths about hypnotherapy, and we've touched on one in particular about the fact that we can't make people do anything they really don't want to do. And the other one that we've mentioned is the fact that you're not asleep.
Yeah.
Some people think you can get stuck in hypnotherapy or hypnosis.
Yeah.
And that would be them. And I don't know if you explain this to people, but the way I sort of, I make a wee bit of a joke out of it, in the sense that I say that you can't get stuck in it. They're not going to be sitting there in a chair in 3 years' time with dust on the shoulders and things like that. But I do say it's, mind you won't, whatever it is, you won't have been smoking for 3 years. You won't have been, you'll have lost weight, whatever it is that doing. But it is something that comes up. And also, I don't know if you've had this.
Just before you move on to that, I think people worry about that more with online hypnosis sessions, because I know that particularly during lockdown, we've both done more sessions online with people. And I think people worry that would more likely be the case if they're not face-to-face. But it just doesn't happen, does it? Occasionally, if you're listening to something and it's not face-to-face, so if you've got a recorded audio, you might fall asleep at the end, but that's because you're so relaxed. But you're not stuck in hypnosis. I just wanted to say that about the online stuff as well. No,
that's a very good point. You're not at all. And along with that, some people think that only weak-minded people, I'm strong, I can do all this. Only weak-minded people are susceptible to hypnosis. That's complete nonsense. And along with that one is the fact that some people can't be hypnotized. Well, actually, anybody can be if they're open to it. Some might take a little longer than others, but anybody can be.
Well, that's like saying there's some people that can't ever relax. Of course they can if they choose to do so and they take the time to do so. It's the same sort of thing, because that is all it is, isn't it? It's relaxation. It's just a deeper level of relaxation. So if you can relax, or you can sit and just be quiet for 5 minutes and enjoy that time of peace, then you could be hypnotized.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah, I great. Coming back to this idea of making people do things that they don't want to do. I don't know if you're aware of this. Again, it happened quite a while ago, but the CIA in America and the KGB in Soviet Union or Russia, they spent billions of dollars trying to perfect the perfect spies and assassins, using hypnosis. And it's not just me that's saying it, though I am saying it. It is, you can go online, because all of these records, both from the Soviet Union time and from the CIA, are available. And you can look at some of the experiments and things they try to do to perfect the sort of military use of hypnosis. And I started this by talking about the Manchurian Candidate, the film.
Yeah.
And it just so happened I was doing a bit of research and ventured into CIA territory the other day. And I actually came up with one of their research documents, or the history of their research into a particular program, and it was subtitled "The Manchurian Candidate." So, so probably got it from the film, but that it was basically the same type of thing.
In principle, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think we've given a fairly good overview of hypnosis and hypnotherapy, which is where we kind of wanted to go today, isn't it? And I think we'll look at something a bit more specific next time, but keep your eye out for us. We are going to be doing regular podcasts. Feel free to subscribe us up here somewhere, I think, and then you can keep a track of where we're at.
Geez, I never know where it is. That could be either way. Yeah.
Somewhere.
Yeah.
And yeah, we'll cover all sorts of things. It won't just be hypnosis either. We will probably talk about mental health things as well along the way, won't we? And more specific things. But yeah, please do give us a follow, subscribe to us. Please ask any questions as well in the comments below. And thank you for joining us. I'm Abby, and
I'm Andrew. Yes, I nearly forgot who I was there for a moment. But, anyway, I'm Andrew, and we'll see you next time. So
We'll
thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.